So I just on that point, Sam, about just cause.
Yeah.
I liked a lot, and Submit too, for you, those of you who've read it, I liked a lot the 5 conditions for something to be a just cause, which is that it's powerful, and that is, and I love that he talked about, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, later in the forum, or in our presentation, that it's different than a moonshot, which is literally like the JFK vision to go to the moon, to send a man to the moon and come back to Earth safely was the vision or mission, whichever word, big, hairy, audacious goal, right, is different from a just cause. And the ways in which it's different, I thought were really cool, because, so much of today's, especially the younger generation, are really looking for that. They're looking for something that has this big, meaningful quality to it that isn't necessarily just what you were saying about the Wells Fargo example, where it's just a BHAG. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal that nobody else believes in.
Yeah.
What were they? They were, the 5 conditions were, has to be unattainable, service to someone else, not oneself, right? So it can't just line your own pockets. Submit, do you remember the others?
No, I will need to refer back to my notes somewhere here.
Yeah, I actually use it as a guideline for our values. That's on our value statement. So they're listed there. I listed them all, those 5 points.
Oh, I don't think I saw the final document on that. Is that the one that we engaged with?
Yes, it is. So it's at the top that has the just cause on it. Yeah.
I don't think I saw the final version of it. I just, it engaged with the actual values exercise. Is that in the drive?
Yeah, it is. I'll reshare it with you.
Yeah, I would love to, definitely would love to look at that.
So reference the book again that you're talking about. So
the Infinite Game.
The Infinite Game, and who's the author?
Simon Sinek. So he's the author of the Why, right? That everybody knows him from the Why movement. Start with Why.
Okay. And you said you could get that on Audible?
For sure. It's on Audible. Okay. Yeah, and what he's saying is that in today's day and age, and this is so true, that and he makes this distinction between finite and infinite games. And finite games they have a beginning, middle, and an end. They have a scoreboard. And they are, the purpose of them is to win.
Mm-hmm.
An infinite game, the purpose of the game is to keep playing. And if you think about that, it's pretty profound, right? There is no end ever. The goal is to keep playing. And so if you have this just cause that we were talking about, there's never any time, like one of the examples he uses is eradicating world hunger, which was an actual real just cause of certain people throughout history. But it has this incredibly powerful story. I assume you've read it, Submit, about the Wawrczyk, who is really the founding father of the seed banks.
Oh, yeah.
And during the Second World War, the people were starving in Leningrad, and the seed bank was housed there. And these people who were stewards of it, Wawrczyk, I think, died during that period of time, but the people who were stewards of the seeds that they had been collecting were fulfilling his vision or just cause of eradicating world hunger by, creating, no matter what happens in the world, we have a seed bank, and there are over 2,000 of them now, that we can grow our own food. And of course, so people are literally eating the wallpaper paste, their dogs and their cats, in order to stay alive.
Wow.
Sitting in the middle of this city is the seed bank. And the people that were part of Wawrzyk's team most of them died of malnutrition.
Wow.
And because they held that vision, it was like it would be unthinkable to have grown crops from those seeds and fed the city of Leningrad, because it would have eradicated the whole purpose of all the Czechs' vision. So that is a pretty powerful example of a just cause.
Yeah.
Well, I will definitely download the book and listen to it today.
Yeah, definitely a great read. I mean, it's going through that is very inspirational and definitely have things that make you a better person and also a better leader. So it's a lot of great examples. Mm-hmm.
Great.
You know, and another topic I just saw this morning on I think it was a CNN feed, that really interesting little piece about how the 1918 pandemic, how they handled the school back to school situation, which was right about this time of year.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, they shut down. They pretty much shut down all schools. And it's saying here, even though the world was a different place, the discussion was just as heated. I didn't realize that pandemic killed an estimated 5 million people worldwide.
Wow.
Three cities opted to keep their schools open. Want to guess who they were?
New York?
Yep. That's one of them. Chicago.
Okay.
And New Haven, Connecticut. Which is so interesting, because a couple of those were pretty hard hit with the flu. But they thought that it said New York had almost 1 million school children in 1918, and about 75% of them lived in tenements in crowded, unsanitary conditions. So they figured school was actually a cleaner environment.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was hygiene happening there, and yeah.
Well, that's pretty fascinating. It's amazing what the schools are doing right now with having like plastic dividers in between each of the areas, and all the sanitation. What was really interesting is yesterday we were watching a Summit will like this, the Hard Knocks show.
I'm sharing this while you're talking.
Oh, yeah?
That's them. Their school.
Oh my gosh.
Our guys, they wear that diaper on their face.
Yeah, that's probably what that is, right?
Yeah, we think we have it hard with our modern masks. They're wearing like a sweat lodge right on their right beneath their nose.
No, we were watching the Hard Knocks, which is a sports show, and they were showing all the NFL teams and what they're having to do right now, and doing the testing every day and all the social distancing, and they're I guess it's what is it, Submit, the Chargers and the Rams. So it's like all the sports teams are really having a hard time just practicing right now with all the distancing and everything they have to do.
I can't even imagine getting tested every day. I mean, I took the test once and it's highly unpleasant.
Yeah.
Right. I hear it's kind of painful, right?
It is.
Which are you talking about, the COVID test?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that they're somebody just released a saliva-based version of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife just got tested yesterday because being a teacher, she's got to get ready to go to school, and they're offering the test to determine if she's had it or if she has it, and then
so there's an all-in-one test now, huh?
Oh, well, no, you have to do either or both.
Yeah.
But they're just trying to do whatever they can to be safe and secure. I mean, every morning they taking temperatures and keeping a log and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of a funny story though is that they were doing the training on this. The teachers were doing the training on this, and they were showing how to take temperature out in the and of course they were outside to be making sure they were social distancing, right? But it was a hot summer day, and they're out there just a couple days ago, and everybody was popping up with temperatures that are in the fever stage. And they realized that, geez, we're out in the middle of the sun and we're all sweating. and
Oh.
So they got in the shade and cooled down, and then that it was all normal. But yeah, so things you don't think of.
Well, I guess we could get started now.
Ah.
So, hey, it's already 10 o'clock. So, hey, we wanted to welcome everyone and welcome to our People Strategy Forum. We have a very dynamic topic today to discuss around strategies for periods of turbulent times and resetting expectations for the workforce. So, and we're very happy to welcome Robert Smith, who is going to be one of our guest speakers. And it looks like he's just joining us now. But so, hello everyone. My name is Shar Miller. I am a people strategist, talent management strategist, and I do career coaching, HR with a Heart, and I also own a company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. And I'm also pleased to be partnering with Sam Reeve, who's a reward strategist and compensation strategist. And he is the founder and owner of Comp Team, who has done a fantastic, phenomenal job of helping us get these forums going every week. And then also Lisa Jackson is a culture strategist. She's partnered with us, and she is she owns and founder of Corporate Culture Pros, and so real culture strategist, and also Sumit Singla, and he's had just some great experience working in HR and talent management strategies, and he also owns his own consulting business as well. And then also we will welcome Robert Smith. So hi, Robert. Thanks for joining us today. And he's the founder and CEO of The Change Shop. So this is a great discussion, as we all know that in our workforce today that we're dealing with some significant changes and challenges. So this is going to be a very relevant discussion, and Robert will give you more information about his background. So to talk about how our conversation will go today, this is a forum type of format. And what we do is we highly encourage your participation. So if you notice down here in the chat down below, we ask that you participate. We have HR leaders, CEOs, C-suite leaders, all types of industry expertise here. And so please participate with us. If you have a story, if you have an example or a question, please let us know. And then also what we do is a poll. So Sam will pull up a poll, and this is where we offer you a gift. And we give you a gift of our time, either a TMA assessment, which you'll hear about us reference several times throughout the presentation today. So you can have a free assessment there, as well as access to a TMA portal. And then also you can visit with any one of us today, 15 minutes or more of your time and our time. And so just check the box, and Sam will pull that up for you. And go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I have it up. It's on the screen. So once you go ahead and select something there, if you want to have the TMA portal access, or so basically what that's like is that we'll send you an assessment that you can complete, and then upon completing that assessment, you'll get access to the TMA portal, which will give you the results of everything. Several screens of information showing your work preference, your work style preference, and how you like to interact with people and so forth. It's kind of a fun thing, and very revealing about yourself. But of course, like all assessments, there's pieces in there that you may not agree with, and which it's actually designed for that, so that it can encourage a good discussion, a coaching discussion, in which we'll be happy to go through those results with you if you take that assessment. So
yeah, and it's been fantastic. I've been using that with my company and my employees as well, and it's really created a great dynamic result relative to talent management. So also we ask that you share this forum. It's found on compteam.net. And you'll find not only today's recording, but you'll find all the prior recordings that we'll reference during our discussion today. And if you don't want to listen to the not so happy news, listen to these. Put this on and listen to our presentations in the past. I think it'll be very enlightening. So let's talk about today. So the topics we're going to talk about is Sumit and Lisa will talk about cultural resilience in a change, constant, and never normal world. And so they'll talk about that, and then also that ties in nicely with the discussion that Robert and I will have relative to change through challenge and getting buy-in during times of turbulent change. And then also you'll notice that Sam and Sumit and Lisa and I will always go ahead and have a forum type of discussion. And we invite you, if you would like to be part of the discussion, just let us know in the chat. So without further ado, I'd like to kick us off. So Sumit and Lisa, what do you think about cultural resilience in a time of change?
Very important topic. And Sam, is this yours or my screen?
This
here?
is mine, so you can go ahead and you can go ahead and share your own screen.
Okay. All right. I think this will work. Submit.
So, I mean, I agree. I think it's an absolutely vital topic to be talking about right now. And the discussion has moved over from the new normal to a never normal world. And we're now recognizing that the pace of change with or without COVID is so rapid that we just can't say we're shifting to a new normal or things have changed in the last 2 years. So by the time, and this isn't intended to scare you at all, but by the time we sign off from this forum, there might have been some completely earth-shattering changes that have happened in the world, and our world will never be the same as what it is at this very minute. In fact, the image that you see on the screen right now is a prime example of such disruptive change. It's one that's doing the rounds these days. This oddly shaped structure is a bridge in Honduras. And it begs the question that the river seems to be in a different direction altogether. Why exactly did they build the bridge where it's built right now? So the answer to that is the area has been hurricane affected for many, many years. And in 1930, they got some of the best architectural talent and some of the best engineers in the world to create this bridge, thinking they wanted a structure which will last. It lasted till about 1998 when Hurricane Mitch struck. One of the very few structures left standing in the entire country was this bridge, which is fantastic. But the only catch being the hurricane was so severe that the river changed its course, rendering the bridge absolutely useless. So no matter how much time, how much thought, how much effort we put into something, we have to be ready for that kind of disruption. And that's exactly what the story of the never normal world is all about. Lisa, would you like to talk about what kind of changes we're facing right now?
So I've captured a lot of the things that we know as a forum. We've been talking about so many of these disruptive changes. One of the things that I wanted to tee up with this set of massive societal shifts is the context. I was reading a book few years back. It's a little old at this point. I think it was written in 2005. But in the bigger picture of the context of the book, it's actually still relatively recent. It was written by a woman named Mary O'Hara Devereaux, and she wrote this book. It's called Navigating the Badlands. And it's a book about, she's a futurist in a think tank, and back in the late 1990s, her clients, Royal Dutch Shell and big companies like that, were doing long-term scenario planning. And they were saying to her, we can't make sense of the environment that we're seeing. Everything seems like it's changing so quickly. This is back in the late 90s, right? And she launched or initiated a think tank of economists, sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists, people who had, sort of a broad range of points of view on what happens and change in a society. And they studied back to the dawn of writing, which is really the first time you could have facts that you could actually record legitimately, or at least that's what they chose to do, was go back to the dawn of writing. So that was about 4,000 years ago. And they studied 8 periods of disruptive change between then and now. And one of the things that they learned about disruptive change is that I want to point out today, there were several things, but one of them is that every single society that has gone through one, the systems in that society crumbled during the disruptive change. So the dawn of writing, if you think about that, and just what a massive change that was for society, especially with the dawn of the printing press. What we're seeing now with the internet is similarly scaled. The systems that break down, all of them, governmental, economic, societal systems break down and then are reformed around this innovation. The internet was born roughly in 1983. That was the precursor, was the ARPANET. World Wide Web came along in 1990. Her prediction or thought in 1998, I believe, was that we're about 30 years into this cycle of disruptive change, and we're starting to see the breakdowns of the society. The big difference is this is on a global scale. And in one generation, we've become a truly global society, and freer movement of people, ideas, goods, and services across the entire world. Witness the fact that my colleague is sitting in his nighttime cave in India, Sumit and I are co-presenting today, but what a miracle to be able to have this kind of context and conversation at a time when in 1918 and the big flu pandemic, Zoom meetings and Zoom happy hours and virtual meetings were not an option. The psychological contract of work has shifted massively since 1980. I think it's probably the biggest change I've seen in my work over the last 20 years. And that is that in the 1980s, obviously we had M&A craze, and that accompanied by mass downsizings, death of the pension, lifetime employment. My parents went to work with the expectation they would have one job. It didn't work out that way, but that was their expectation. Our children have no expectation of that. And that is really that watching their parents be laid off, watching the death of loyalty, really, in terms of a two-way street between an organization and its people, has led an entire generation to own their time and career. And we know that, but it's, I think, helpful to understand the context in which that happened. It isn't just uppity millennials wanting their way. It's really the psychological contract of work that in itself has changed. Obviously, we have a massive amount of demographic diversity, societal values. The world has transformed around 4 generations in the workplace. Business extinction is accelerating since 2000. 52% of the Fortune 500 have gone bankrupt or ceased to exist. Before COVID, experts predicted business extinction will accelerate, and another 40% will churn by 2025. We're going to see, obviously with COVID, probably an acceleration even of that prediction. And then just digital transformation in companies, the increasing mandate to digitize all systems, processes, products, and your entire workforce around technology and automation centric, which is going to put a lot of burden on the education system in order to prepare people and train people for filling those kind of roles. And obviously COVID, a microorganism, has suddenly radically changed the world forever. So if we are doubting disruptive change and feeling uncomfortable with change, this is understandable in the context and the environment that we're in. So that sort of lays the foundation for the conversation we want to have today about the more things change. In some ways, the more they stay the same. Sumit?
So this is a very, very interesting quote. It's lived through a couple of centuries, and it was intended as a very, very cynical statement given by somebody during the French Revolution, when the idea was that no matter how many revolutions take place, the fate of the peasants is still going to be terrible and people are still going to suffer, no matter who's the ruler. But in the current context, I think this just serves to sum up what Lisa spoke about. Despite all the disruptions, I think we're among the hardiest species on the planet. We've learned to adapt. We've learned to not only survive, but we're actually learning to thrive. So even though COVID, it seems to be one of the biggest disasters that's ever happened to us, it's absolutely tragic that there's so many people losing their lives. There's so many people who are in hospital, but at the same time, we're also grappling to take control of our lives and not be locked inside for long duration. So we're learning to adapt to going out to work. We're learning to adapt to travel, eat out at restaurants, and so on and so forth. So change is always going to be disruptive. It's always going to be around us. But the real answer is, how do we adapt and how do we change things around us so that we don't render ourselves extinct? And we speak about a little more of this from the employee perspective and what people want on the next slide. So,
one more thing really quick, Sumit, just I can
sure,
mention
Sam.
something about that. So yeah, I think that's what you said as far as the change and what Lisa was saying is how, as far as change is happening more rapidly as time goes on. But I think the big thing that to point out here is that, you know, there is some suffering with any type of change, you know, that we're dealing with. And our first thing that we would like to do is, of course, resist that, because we like the way things were. It's comfortable and so forth. I think that I'm thinking of a few weeks back when we were talking about with Andreas Fritsch, and he was discussing the getting out in the comfort zone and really into that growth area. I think the natural thing is we like to resist change, but and we feel suffering when we're in that resistance stage. And growth also has a bit of suffering that's involved in it. But the point is as we adapt, with the suffering diminishes over time. So I think that it's critical for us not to resist and to move forward so that we can move out of the suffering stage, out of that fear stage.
And just a quick add on to that, Sam, that Mary O'Hara Devereux, the book I just mentioned, The Navigating the Badlands, talked about what happens is you'll see something, and I don't wish to pinpoint any one person in this, but she talks about this concept called toxic leadership, that during the era of massive change, the new demand around digital transformation in our case, right, you'll see the old guard leaders really be the holder of that resistance, right? And they want to still be able to have things be sort of run in the way that they were trained and brought up and promoted to lead. And so what really the transformation you're talking about eliminating resistance, Sam, comes when a new generation of leaders is born that see the world through the new lens. And so they just set up systems and processes and ways of working in this case that are aligned more to that particular discovery or disruptive innovation. And that's where you're seeing leaders such as Amazon and Google and Facebook built companies around digital, right? That was the whole entire organization was built around it. So there's less resistance to change in those situations. But
that, and I'll just want to point out, I just had a conversation the other day with an online learning company that teaches college courses. And you know, that's part of the thing as far as change, being able to see the future or see where trends are going and to get ready for those trends. I know a lot of my clients fortunately did really well through this COVID crisis because of, you know, listening how to change things in compensation and rewards and so forth. Well, one thing that this college campus did is, you know, they moved to digital learning in a big way a long time ago and have been growing that platform. And then with the onset of COVID, they just saw a huge shift over to that platform. And so their performance was not hurt that well, and it was not that affected. And actually, they've been able to increase profit and so forth during this time. And as a result, take care of their people, take care of the community, and, you know, still running strong. So it's important that we foresee and we adapt.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks for the great insight, Sam. And on that note, we'll also talk about what's stayed the same. So there's some fundamentals which are unchanged, and multiple consulting organizations keep researching on what is the most important, or what are some of the most important factors that people care about. The interesting thing is that in the top 7 or 8 factors, the 5 that you see on screen are pretty much common. So the first one talks about respect and how people like to be respected. And obviously that doesn't change from day to day or just based on the disruptive factors that Lisa spoke about. So whether you're a customer, whether you're an employee, you'd want to be respected. In fact, one company which is always in the news for the wrong reasons is United Airlines. Um, I've personally never flown it, but not even tempted to. So one of the most iconic stories about their lack of respect has been there's a viral video called United Breaks Guitars. So um, there was a band performer, and he had this really expensive Taylor guitar, which he saw the United staff were throwing around when they were handling the cargo, and it was I think it was for about $3,500 the guitar, and when he tried to bring it up with them, they were indifferent to him. The guitar turned up broken when he opened it, and United refused to take any responsibility. So this guy, because he was from the industry, so he made a YouTube video called United Breaks Guitars, and he put it up online. So this was about 12 years ago, but the videos gathered about 20 million hits so far. And it keeps coming up in the news every few years. So 2017, when the airline forced a passenger to deboard and it became a big piece of national news, this video was trending again, and Twitter was all over with hashtag United Breaks Guitars. So the point I'm trying to make is that one act of disrespect is going to be etched in time. We live in a digital era where you will not be able to erase that digital footprint of yours. You do you perform a good gesture as a company, as an individual, it might just be forgotten. Something negative will always keep cropping up like a bad penny and will come back to haunt you. So respect is crucial. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a US company which is into technology. It's called Teleword. They employ, so most of their employees are women from correctional facilities. So they refuse to use the word inmates for them. They refer to people as Miss last name. They've got double-digit growth, or close to double-digit, for the last 5 or 6 years. In addition, research indicates that the tendency of these women to serve out their terms, go back to the outside world, and then commit a crime is 80% lower than the national average. So it does seem to speak to the fact that you treat people with respect. You're not only impacting those individuals, you're impacting the entire community, and you're impacting people around them as well. And the best thing of it is that, and it ties into my second point, we've got limited wallets, but the great thing about respect is it's free. It doesn't cost anything at all to give anyone respect at all. Which brings me to the next one about compensation. Again, we tend to forget that employees and people, they're basically smart. They understand we're going through a tough time. So nobody is saying that, oh, the company is going through a 40% reduction in sales, but I want whatever bonus and whatever fixed pay was promised to me. I don't think anyone's immature enough to say that. But organizations are starting to create innovative ways to handle this aspect. So, for example, a consulting organization in India, what they've done is they've told certain grades that you'll be getting something like a salary cut. However, at the end of the year, subject to your individual performance, forget about the company's performance. If you do well, we will give you back that percentage as variable pay. So if my fixed pay is $100 right now, you say a 5% salary cut, so 95 over the year, and the $5 would be paid out if I perform above a certain set of expectations. And those expectations aren't that I need to climb Mount Everest to land on the moon before I get it. They're regular, reasonable expectations. And morale in the company, so I work with a couple of people there. Despite the negativity all around, morale in the company has actually increased after the cuts, because people realize that despite not having money in their own wallet, the organization is trying to do its best to keep business and people priorities aligned. And I'm sure Sam would have a couple of insights because of his extensive experience in the reward space.
Yes, I mean, there's as far as compensation, the thing that's definitely stayed the same is that people, when we people still need to get paid, right? And it's very important to make sure that if they have a highly leveraged plan or big bonuses that are typically attached to their pay package, that we reassess on what needs to happen this year to ensure that those payouts occur in a way that's fair.
Fairness is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Fairness is important, and also getting things back.
Sacrifices, won't they, Sam, if they feel it's done fairly?
Oh, I'll say that once more, Lisa.
Well, people are more willing to make sacrifices in a period such as this if they felt that the process was handled fairly.
Absolutely. So it has a couple factors in there. Transparency. So if people understand the reason why the company needs to do this or that, I mean, and being involved in that decision is very empowering. If we empower our people, they are more bought in to what needs to take place as a member of that community or business. And so and companies shouldn't be afraid to go there. You know, if they've managed compensation effectively and transparently in the past, it's easy for them to open up and retain their people and get them further engaged and preserve their compensation where it's fair and where the company can actually achieve that. So it's very important. It's like I said, those factors are transparency and good communication, and trust is what will help in this area. It's not something that can happen overnight. So those companies that have walked into the COVID situation without those pieces being in place are hurting. So it's important for resilience and agility for the future to make sure that trust is well established, good communication is there.
And talking about trust
part in senior leaders, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So that's what I was going to talk about, the trust part of it. And the example I had here was when you hear the "I have a dream" speech, after so many decades, it doesn't fail to inspire you, right? I mean, sitting in India, having no real connection with the movement it was intended to inspire, I still get goosebumps when I listen to that speech. Can our corporate leaders claim to have that kind of inspiration? So you hear a leader in a town hall, a lot of times it's the usual drab things like, we've got great vision, we're going to do this, do that. And you're saying, all right, go on. What's the bad news? Break it to me. Tell me what part of my benefits are you taking away now? So that faith in senior leaders, so the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not the faith that stayed the same. It's the need to have that faith and the need to have somebody who you can stand up on a desk for and say, oh, captain, my captain. That need still exists, and people would love to do that. Just that we need leaders to be a lot more authentic, a lot more genuine, and having people at the center of what they're saying. And that also kind of ties into the job security part of it, because again, people understand and they can see the writing on the wall if a company is not doing well. The way you handle the job security concerns is vital. So we spoke on this forum, we spoke about outplacement, we spoke about compassionately letting people go. So respectfully treating people, even if you're letting them go, or even if you anticipate that their job security may not be great in the current scenario, would help. Again, there are organizations that are tying this in with the recognition part of it. So people like health services, folks who are even folks like food delivery people, they're being recognized by their organizations as COVID warriors, and being told that their jobs are not only safe, but they're at the forefront of helping all of us deal with the current crisis and bringing some semblance of normalcy to our lives. So whether it's in internet modem repairman or somebody who delivers a pizza for a living, these are all people who deserve that respect. They're people who are being recognized in various ways. So much so, I work as an independent contractor on a marketplace called Upwork. So Upwork has announced a $1 million grant to support businesses and freelance professionals as well to help them deal with the crisis. So job security in what's essentially an unsecure job is coming in, and they realize it's important for the long game that they're playing, the infinite game, so to say, and that's what they're dealing with. And the final point I have here is on upskilling or reskilling. So smart, mature companies like.
Before you take that
Sorry,
point,
Lisa.
I wanted to mention about the job security piece. I think you make a powerful point about Upwork that it's predicted that something close to 50% of people consider themselves freelance at this point in the sort of working population at least in the United States, and growing. And so by 2030, it's that feeling I spoke to earlier that especially the millennial generation and younger, I own my time. And I'm going to decide. And so the job security, the impetus for job security now, and I'm not saying it's changed completely. There's still this wish for us to, if we're employed, to be able to stay employed. But I think it's really important to realize that the ownership for that job security, that's shifting in terms of who owns that.
Yeah,
Great point, Lisa.
Just a point on that. I mean, there's the workplace is changing, and the way we do work is changing over the past several years. And this event is going to accelerate that. I had a conversation with somebody that worked at a major company, and they're also doing a lot of freelance or gig work on the side as well. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking to them and say, oh, well, how's things going at this big company? And they go, well, yeah, well, they're my largest client. They're doing great. I love working there, and so forth. But it is interesting hearing her refer to them as their biggest client and her main employer. So,
well, and in my day, if you had a side hustle, when I was starting my career, that was grounds for termination.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so today you better just expect that people probably have more than one.
Well, right. I mean, just it's something. It's a good discussion to have with your employer to ensure that stuff, freelancing and gig work on the side, is okay. And I think that employers need to allow that to happen, especially to help and secure their employees in times like this when they're worried about, or they may have to cut back on other work that depending on what they're doing. But I think that's just the trend of where we're going in the future. We're all we all have our own skill set, and we can apply that to many companies, and I think that's just going to be the trend going forward.
And again, talking of skills, Sam, the need to learn new stuff, the need to stay relevant in a world that's changing every day is crucial as well. The great news is that the smarter folks and the ones who deal with disruptive technology, they're realizing it real quick. So to give you an example, Microsoft has announced a $700 million budget for training people, folks like SAP, Oracle, Adobe. And I mean, I think it's no surprise that a lot of these companies are in the technology space, because they do see the power of technology. They do see digital disruption and change hitting them every day. So they're probably more tuned to it. They're more used to it than some of the traditional ones. And I think it's great if they're being able to support the employee need for upskilling and reskilling. So,
well, at that point, Sumit, there's Oracle you mentioned is going through a massive round of layoffs. I know 2 people personally who have been laid off by Oracle, and I think that a big part of what you're talking about is that they're transferring, the war chest they're creating for training, and the justification for it is on the backs of the people they're letting go. So it really, I think, is a huge shift in what we've been talking about around digital transformation. Getting serious about it means they're letting go of people who have not kept up with those skills. So that in many cases, and I'm not saying that's a universal reason to let people go, but there is this idea that we're gonna use the money to train people in artificial intelligence and different ways of using technology. Sorry.
Absolutely. I think that's another great insight. And so to summarize what we've been talking about so far, the last few points, I think the faster we learn, and the sooner we can get out of the denial and the suffering stages of change, the better prepared we will be for what's going to hit us next. And we'll come out of it shining rather than bruised and battered. And so over to you, Lisa, for some of the lessons that we can learn from what's happening around us.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and because my whole work is about helping organizations translate resistance to change into desire for it, right? And making employees actually want the change. I was thinking about what are the really 3 core things that I teach over and over and over with clients. And most of the time I teach these because I see that they're the places that they don't do well. So the first one, this is not going to be new to you. All of you have seen this idea of know who you are. So you could talk about that as a vision or a mission, but the answer to the why we exist and why should our customers care. So what is it that we really do that we can be as employees, as leaders proud of, that we can impart an experience to customers. That's more and more important than ever, not just a product or a service, but an experience to customers. That has to start from within. Just like all true change begins from within a person in a society and an idea that is born, that has to begin with people in the organization feeling connected to the vision, feeling that I have a dream is real. If you all have not picked up, and didn't hear us riffing before the forum started about The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, please get your copy of it. It's amazing, amazing. And I just, about halfway through it, so I haven't even gotten to the other parts of it that are the meat of the book. But one of the things he talks about is the difference between a business used to be what he calls a finite game, which a finite game is like football. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has rules that everyone agrees to, and those rules we agree to as players be penalized if we break them. And the biggest thing about an infinite game is that there's a winner and a loser. With an infinite game, there is no beginning, middle, or end. There's never an end. The goal of the game is not winning, it's continuing to play. And he talks a lot about business being more of an infinite game. He uses an example of a moonshot, which is obviously many of you may remember this. I was 6 years old in first grade when we sent the man to the moon and brought him back to Earth safely, and we publicized it on black and white television in the middle of our classroom. I very much remember that in 1968, but that was a finite game. That was a mission that had a beginning, middle, and end. The goal was to win against Russia, and it was very specific to that particular mission, and it birthed the whole space exploration movement, but which is become infinite game, but it was in itself a very finite BHAG, big hairy audacious goal. So he uses an example of eradicating world hunger as being an infinite game. He thinks business today is an infinite game, which I 100% agree with, that the goal is to create a legacy beyond yourself that can live on, and to build the company in such a way that it's so healthy that it can continue playing, and that it is strong enough to continue playing. And when you make that shift in your mind, it's profound. So having the just cause, as Simon talks about it, has a few criteria associated with it. One is that it has to be for something rather than against poverty. He talks about being for enabling people to take care of their families. It has to be inclusive of everyone, service oriented. It needs to be that ongoing resilient type of mission that has the ability to continue to play and have business strategy, and cultural change has to go with it. A just cause has to constantly be changing and shifting. Change is built into the definition of it. and that it is idealistic, so that people feel as though it is something I want to connect myself to and be part of. And it doesn't mean everyone has to have their own just cause. He's not talking about that as a personal why. So for those of you who know Simon Sinek's work around the power of why, he makes that distinction very clearly, that a just cause is a much bigger kind of draw that allows us to continue playing in the game and being part of it, rather than having this feeling of you're benched or you're in or you're out or you're cut, you know, as you might be from a football team. So the second big lesson in change is to ask. Any of you who've read Ryan Levesque's book called Ask will relate to this principle, and you probably are doing this in your business in some way. I love Ryan Levesque's question: customers. What's the single biggest challenge you're struggling with in your business right now? And allowing that to be a conversation tee up, but really getting close to your customers enough that you understand that in terms of how you can frame the next offering or product or service that you supply is an incredibly powerful way to maintain a relationship with change that is about building capacity for it and continuing to play in the game, rather than having it be something that has an end point and dies off. And so that mindset is quite a bit different than change management. It's quite a bit different than even change as a program or as an event or as a particular time frame with a beginning, middle, and end. And asking employees all the time, what should we preserve or change in our culture? I think allowing smart risk taking is one of the biggest shifts that the infinite game allows and needs to allow it to be made in business, is that we're pushing more and more of the decision making down to the front lines of the people in your company who are facing the customer, but you've got to allow for smart risk taking. And that's one of the things that business has not done very well, at least in the companies that I have been working with. They really avoid risk, and that is unfortunately a very difficult environment in which to foster innovation. So asking your people. Change lesson number 3, many of you will relate to this one, that it's about failing fast. So if we're allowing people to take risks, we don't want them to be so big that they end up costing us a year of recovery. So failing fast is the intentional innovation of a particular part of your business. Many of you may have some experience with FedEx days. So this was invented by the folks at the Australian company Atlassian, L-A-T-L-A-S-S-I-N. One-day burst of autonomy, allow people to work on anything they want, as long as it's not part of their regular job. And then they come back together for this contest. They have these innovation jamborees. They call them FedEx days because participants have to deliver something overnight. And so there's a really cool video that I'm not going to talk about here, but the Dutch company Pat held a FedEx day recently, and to get a sense of how it worked, you could check out, there's a 4-minute video by Rini van Solingen, which is really a powerful story of how that works. How do leaders build trust and empowerment in an organization? Because that's the other side of the failing fast. You have to signal as leaders to people that taking risks is not only okay, but that it's a necessity for the business. And what does that look like? You've got to be able to demonstrate it and model it and not just preach it. So I love this example of David Ground, who's the founder and CEO of Code Ninjas. He starts brainstorming with this hard truth. Announces that 90% of what his staff is going to say is never going to happen, which I think is great. There are no stupid ideas, he says, so just let them flow. You never know what you might say that will inspire someone else, even if your idea was a flop or it's not appropriate for the timing. When an idea strikes a chord, he has 4 questions to ask his employees to determine whether it will be pursued. These are really good questions. 1, how is it going to fail? Number 2, can we mitigate that failure? Number 3, is it within our realm of expertise? And number 4, is it on brand? So I, by the way, want to just mention to all of you that we teach in my work clients an empowerment and trust building exercise. I don't have time to go through it here, but if you want to grab it, just pop a note in the chat and I'll take a look at that later and make sure to email you a copy of it. So those are 3 change lessons. We're going to tee this up for Robert to come in and build on what we've just talked about here. But in the meantime, Sumit and I would love the opportunity to share some of these ideas with your organization. I do 15 to 30-minute virtual keynotes for companies on cultural agility, creating innovation, and leadership resiliency. If this is something you have a leadership team or a conference kickoff or a training class, this is a complimentary offer to you. So you can reach out to me either in the chat or you can get time, grab time on my calendar here. Sam has just popped up the box, and Sumit has a similar offer.
Great.
Sumit, you want to talk?
Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. That is very interesting. I have to say, I've been through a lot of change in my career in healthcare, and I can't imagine what they're going through now today. So these are very vital in all companies. So very good point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shar.
So hi, Robert. How are you? So Robert is joining us.
I am on mute. I am doing well.
That is fantastic. We are so glad to have you.
All right. Likewise. Glad to be here.
That's great. So I understand you have a presentation as well.
I do. Let me pull that guy up.
Yeah, and you can share that. So yeah, this is going to be very helpful as we talk about what your ideas are. So each of the topics are very much aligned.
Absolutely. So really, and then if somebody can just kind of give me a check that you can see my screen.
I see Robert has started sharing his screen. Okay, there we go. I see it.
All right, perfect. So I'll be talking a little bit about change through challenge. So a lot of the themes that Lisa and Sumit brought up already are going to be some repeat themes here. So I'm really looking forward to sharing with it and sharing with you some of my observations with my clients and really kind of dovetailing that conversation. So thank you so much. So just real quick about me, since I'm new to the forum, but I am the founder of the Change Shop, which is a technology web-based organizational change platform for collecting feedback, assessing, managing, and tracking organizational changes. So we work a lot with clients, especially very recently, and I'll talk through a couple of examples, clients that are kind of going through organizational change, very oftentimes digital transformation, to kind of help them figure out, what do employees think about this? How do we get employees really bought in and committed to this, particularly when those types of changes are difficult in nature, so which a lot of change tends to be. So we'll kind of get into it.
Great.
Perfect. So obviously we're in the midst of something a little bit different here, sort of a huge global pandemic, and from a workforce perspective, obviously a lot of work from home has been an impact there from a workplace perspective. Dealing with primary and secondary education, so I've got a couple of university clients who have literally had to say they may have had a very small, say niche, sort of web-based training, web-based curriculum design sort of group, and now that's just exploded as everything has transitioned online for those groups. And then we also have global travel being affected. So Sumit was talking a bit about United Airlines, and really just kind of across the board, what does that mean for the airline industry? So lots of change happening there. Obviously healthcare, so Shar, near and dear to your heart. But yeah, so, and then assisted living facilities, which In Maryland, where I'm based, a lot of the assisted living facilities have had to really either shut down their services, or in some cases transfer elderly persons who are there just because of the danger associated with COVID. So not an easy situation. You think about that from a transition and sort of going to work every day standpoint, really difficult challenges there. Obviously the impacts to the global economy. And so just a number of things that are happening there. So as if COVID wasn't enough, then we had the video of George Floyd's death, and really kind of sparking a national discussion. And a lot of clients or prospects have kind of been coming to us and saying, you know, what does this mean for our workplace? So discussions around, you know, like how do we have like kind of race-based discussions at work? You know, what does it mean to, you know, sort of have a equal workplace? How do we revisit sort of fairness from a racial and gender perspective, reevaluating sort of D&I, diversity and inclusion initiatives and strategies, and really a renewed focus on, you know, what does that mean given, you know, kind of everything. So it's kind of a powder keg of different things that are happening at the same time. From a workplace perspective, and sort of how do you frame those discussions? What does that mean? How do we still keep people engaged despite everything that's going on, and really, you know, kind of use this opportunity as a way to say, not just how do we survive this, but how do we actually thrive? Like, how do we come out on the other side of this an even better organization? Potentially, if we can't grow financially, maybe there's parts of our business that can grow. And so how do we do that given everything that's going on? So those are the types of conversations that we're having with our clients right now. Now, before all of this even started, you know, like we talked about COVID, we talked about sort of the aftermath of George Floyd. So before all of this even started, I was on a bit of a personal journey to figure out what's the holy grail of change commitment. And so what this means is, so as part of my dissertation research, I was essentially asking one main question. When there's a change that's happening at work that would cause someone to potentially lose their job, right? Be that in outsourcing, be that automation, kind of you name it. We were about 12 different dimensions that we evaluated. But when you look at the factors that are associated with job loss, under what circumstance, if at all, would someone say, hey, I am still committed to making that happen? And so upon asking that question, I was really trying to figure out if we could get the persons or those factors that were associated with people saying, yes, I'm still committed to it, then in that way, that would be, you know, sort of quote unquote, the holy grail of change commitment, because then you're saying that these are people who are really bought into the idea that that's being championed, and not just, I have to get through this, like I want to keep my job, you know, those types of things. And yeah, I didn't know if there's a question that came in. I'll pause for a moment.
Not sure if there's a question here.
Mm-hmm.
I see that Brian was mentioning the biggest, most fundamental change that businesses could adopt is changing the attitude, that the default change is reduction in force. And I would say I agree with that. I own a company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, and we actually, with my company, we are in malls. We've done all of our testing and health advocacy face-to-face. So you can imagine that when the malls all got shut down, myself and the senior leaders had to really think about the change in our company, because it brought a whole new light that this is going to impact not only our jobs as owners of the company, but our employees' jobs. And so, you know, we definitely had to think about an entire change perspective that would broaden beyond just basic testing that we do. into more of a health advocacy, and we needed to really start thinking about our virtual opportunities. So, you know, if, for example, we do get shut down again, that we're not just relying on that face-to-face, you know, interaction with the client. So it's interesting because I think at the end of last year, we certainly weren't thinking about change management as actually affecting our jobs and our employees' jobs. So it really brought it to home for us. And
that makes complete and total sense. And it's funny because that whole question of job loss, particularly when an organization, you know, when a workplace is transitioning to something that's massive, right? Because, and this happens all the time where it's like, let's say you announce like a digital transformation, and we'll talk about a couple of cases in a moment, but you announce this digital transformation effort, and then it's like, oh, okay, people are like, oh, okay, you're trying to automate my job, right? Like,
right.
There's always kind of that fear in the background. It's very interesting because even in the prior presentation on Submit Your Slide about job security, again, it kind of goes back to that, like, will this be a place that I can maintain my income and, you know, sort of what I do for, you know, at a minimum, a third of my life, you know, when we think about how much total time we spend at work. So.
Well, and I noticed that Amazon right now, I think this morning I saw on the news, it said that only 16% of all purchasing was done through Amazon, and now it's shot up to over 27%. Which is so online purchasing in the retail space, which is now negatively impacting the small businesses, the mom and pop businesses in the stores, and like our business that's, you know, out of the malls, because ultimately there's talk that those organizations are going to change to more of a Amazon distribution center. So, so it's like, is everything going to be about Amazon and these big box stores? And how can the small businesses really in the retail space, you know, retain and sustain without reducing their employees? So, and now we're competing with the big box Amazons, right? So it's really tough. It's really tough. This change management is going to be more crucial more than ever. And in my opinion, we really need to talk to all levels of the organization and the front line about how we're going to survive during these times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And wow, there's so many things that are kind of coming up for me on that, but that one thing that I'll sort of skip ahead for just a moment to that exact point. One of the things that we know from neurological research is that when high levels of stress and cortisol hit the brain, right, and those levels are increased, we actually it initiates that kind of flight or flight response, right? So it's like now you're not thinking of in sort of a self-protective mechanism. So instead of coming up with like new ideas or here's what we can do differently at just the time you need it, right? Like a time like now where it's like we need to be thinking about different delivery systems. We need to be thinking about what are alternative ways we can sort of get our products out into our customer base. And where you need that innovation during a crisis mode is at the same time that the stress levels are increasing. And so there's some really interesting research that talks about when you're able to, when leaders, and just so you know, I define the term leader very broadly in the sense that everyone can be a leader because everyone has influence in their organization. You know, just a sidebar on the United Airlines example, I'm sure, you know, I would hope that the CEO or, you know, the C-suite of United weren't thinking to themselves, yeah, like this would be a great idea if our bag handlers like destroyed this guitar. But at the same time, that's what happened, right? And so what if even in that sort of micro situation, there was someone who said, this isn't right, like this isn't good. In that instance, that person would have been leading and have been a real leader in their organization that way, and would have literally, like, you know, sort of reduce and manage sort of the risk of everything that sort of transpired after that. So my point is that when you really think about some of these things, anyone can do them, right? It's just a matter of, okay, you're doing it, you're influencing at this level versus this level, but everyone has the capacity to do that. But coming back to the point that you raised, there's some fascinating research that looks at when leaders lead their organization in a way that drives commitment and greater levels of commitment, actually the stress levels are reduced. So there's actual academic research that shows that people become less stressed when you're leading in a change commitment focused way. So it's just very, very interesting kind of information that in sort of science that's sort of backing up some of these points that I think most of us were like, yeah, that sounds right, like that feels right, but actually there's science to kind of back that up as well.
Yeah, absolutely resonates with us. I mean, we were in that flight or flight aspect, and it is very hard to be innovative and thinking of alternatives to sustain your company when you're worried, when you're just fearful. You're fearful and you're trying to apply for the PPP and all of that.
Exactly.
It's very stressful. Hi, Sam. Did you have a thought?
Oh yeah, well, I just wanted to bring up, there's this local story, and I just thought it was a good example. I'm going to take over sharing the screen really quick here. So an example of just getting through that change. This is a local restaurant in my town. It's called the Orr House, and they had a real problem because what they did, like many towns across America, a lot of the restaurants, the main street has been opened up, and they're allowing outdoor dining in the street in a lot of towns to allow for social distancing. Well, the problem with this restaurant is that they were not on the main street, and there was not a place where they could have a patio, and so they've been struggling on finding a solution. And part of that, what they did is just an innovative thing. Is they partnered up with a local hotel where they had a beautiful outdoor area for their guests, and they were able to move their operations to this hotel patio and be able to have their guests that reopen and share their wonderful food. So that's a lot of things as you can imagine what they felt like. It's like there was a solution that the town came up with, opening up the street, but then suddenly they realized, of course, well, that doesn't impact us. What are we going to do? That stress level is huge, as Robert was mentioning. And then moving through and finding a solution that will reduce that stress and create success is exactly what they did. So I just wanted to share that example.
That's great. And to me, that's really like, I love problem solving, right? So when we're working with clients and they're like, okay, we have this challenge and things like that, like coming up with an innovative way that sort of makes sense. And it's like, okay, this kind of factors in all the things that we need to sort of make happen. But at the same time, we're able to come up with like a solution that's a nice kind of workaround. To me, that's really fun. That's how I get, energized and creative. And so it's really cool when you see others that can do that and kind of come up with those solutions. So let me real quick kind of walk you through these factors. And as you think about your own role as a change leader, and supporting, I know a number of the colleagues here on the call are in the HR role. How do you support your leaders and managers and get them kind of in the right mindset to sort of drive change through a turbulent time like this? So here's a couple of things that sort of will resonate. So we call it the 2IC model. So the first I is for impact. So this is where people have to feel like whatever is being changed is something that is meaningful and impactful. And what's interesting about the academic research on this is that in some cases it actually doesn't even matter if the change itself is considered quote unquote good or bad. Just the fact that it's impactful is has its own resonance. And so that was actually that was the biggest driver from a commitment perspective. Is it impactful? The sort of benefit of changing in the time of COVID and George Floyd and things like that, the sort of benefit of changing now is that a lot of that impact is sort of naturally baked in. So if you can sort of leverage that and use those things where it makes sense, of course, but you leverage that and use those things as a jumping off point, then you've sort of hit this bottom one already. The next one up the chain is the second I is for influence. So this is really leading. How do you lead? And what's interesting for the organizational development practitioners out there, kind of our change managers out there, a lot of times you'll hear a lot about the research. It says, okay, we got to get people involved in the change. You know, we have to like have them, allow them to have some input and those types of things. What's interesting is that when we looked at our first data set, which consisted of manufacturing employees and retail employees, actually information edged out participation in a statistically significant way, meaning that these workers, for them to be committed, they actually wanted information about what was going on. And so having that information sort of available and them feeling like leaders were saying, this is what's happening, this is why we're doing it, you know, this is sort of our logic behind it, that was actually, that edged out participation in terms of driving commitment. And then the final thing is C for consistency. So again, in Sumit's slides, and Lisa's slides, I saw the one for trust and leadership. That's exactly what this is. So that final factor is that trust, that trust factor. And how do you get that? We use the C for consistency, because trust is really produced through consistency. So when people, you know, are you doing what you say you're going to do, right? Are you putting your money where your mouth is? Right. So, and that's one thing that that leaders, and sometimes, especially when they're kind of managing budgets and things like that, they're kind of like get caught up in sort of like, what words am I using? Did I exactly say it the same way, the right way? Did I use the right key messages? And sometimes that's not even what people are really paying attention to. They're saying, you know, they're really looking for you to say, okay, are you going to do what you said you're going to do? You kind of said this, but now you're doing something different, and you didn't explain that. They're looking for the consistency. So that's where, so the trust where people see that you're being consistent. Again, they don't have, this isn't, and the funny thing is none of these factors are necessarily agreement factors. These aren't like, oh, I just thought this was like such an amazing idea. Like, that's not really the driver. It's actually, are you leading it in these ways that sort of get people on board from a behavioral perspective, an emotional perspective, and a mental perspective across each of these dimensions. And when you put these together, that really drives that higher level of what we call highly engaged change commitment.
Well, I absolutely love this model. It's very interesting in my experience working with major healthcare systems and their change processes. It was interesting because oftentimes our frontline nurses and frontline clinical providers did not trust senior leaders because of these factors of not being consistent, not building trust, not communicating, not sharing information, and talking about, I mean, I often saw that we had like change programs or change management models and tools. And not only that, I saw at one healthcare system, I literally researched it. There were like literally 7 different teams working on change management with using all the different models that they were using, and they weren't communicating with each other. And it was literally causing mass confusion. and to the front line, it was like they would hear about the change management program and they would literally just block it out. Like, you have no idea what my life is like taking care of a pharmaceutical medication or dealing with a surgeon with a heart in his hand or her hand. And it's like, your change models and don't really resonate with me. I don't trust you,
Right.
you know? And it was fascinating to me, because I'm like, why do we have 7 different teams working on different change models?
Right.
So what you're saying here is true. And I notice in the comments, there's a lot of discussion about that trust with your mind, your plan. I think Lisa was saying here, changing your behaviors. You have to be transparent. You have to be clear. You have to show what it means to have those core values of the team. And I think even the big systems miss the boat, right?
Right.
On building that trust.
And that's exactly right. I mean, part of it, we don't even, I mean, we sort of have this in the background, but a lot of it, it's fundamentally a people issue, right? And, people have been leading people since long before there were change models, right? And,
right.
So that's where it comes. So I'm always really interested in what are those things that, even if you stripped everything away, what are the things that get people to say, okay, like, sure, I'll go with that, right? Or I'll follow you there, independent of, are you following this formal thing? And don't get me wrong, I mean, there's a time and place, especially when you get into larger organizations and you're talking about cross-departmental things, and those are key things. But at the end of the day, especially from kind of a leadership perspective, you have a group of people that are looking at you and they're saying, does this make sense? Does this matter to me? Does it make sense? Like, do I buy this? And do I trust you? That's essentially what, whatever that you like, slap whatever change type of label that you want to put on it. Those are the questions that people are asking themselves as they're kind of taking in information about what you're kind of pitching to them.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes these larger organizations get so caught up in their specific change program, and it's not really resonating to the real meaning of why we're going through this change. And I would assume now, obviously with COVID and people's lives, being impacted, I mean, executive leaders and leaders all in all are now needing to put away the quote tactical activities we do around change management and truly do something that's going to really make a difference in the lives of their patients and their employees.
Absolutely.
So I would expect, just like you said earlier, with all the unrest going on, it's going to be more needed than ever.
Absolutely. So just a couple of things that's very interesting. This is kind of adapted from the Kubler-Ross model. So, but as applied to the COVID-19 situation. So, there's kind of that denial factor. Then you kind of go into that valley of despair where people are starting to feel frustrated. And the nice thing is we've been at this COVID thing for long enough now that I think people are starting to kind of come out on the other end and hit that acceptance. Like, this is something we have to deal with. We're still working through, especially, even, with my own kids and things like that. What does it mean for schools and things like that? So it's not like we're completely like on the other side. There's not a vaccine. But just kind of being aware of what these things, what makes sense, and being aware of what are the stages that we're in for our company, for our organization, and where are people at on this. Because understanding, you may have a large portion of your employee population on one dimension or the other, but you may have individuals that are still kind of in this valley of despair, sort of depressed state. So just kind of, and how do you manage that conversation? So that's where I think things like key messaging and change management become really important, because it's like, what are the tools that we give to our managers and to our team leaders to have a conversation like this? Because there may be people on their teams that are still struggling, and they're on the front lines having to deal with that team member and sort of walk them through this kind of process. So how do you get them from sort of that frustration point to more of that acceptance? And, oh, by the way, we still need to ratchet up our innovation. So we need to be committed to our new ways of doing business so we can still operate as a business. And so those are the types of conversations. But you know, I'm very much a believer in the idea that people, you know, change starts at an individual level. So every individual saying, okay, I'm going to be committed to this, or this makes sense to me. And so starting from that sort of individual approach, and that's that one-on-one conversations that managers are having with their team, to then also kind of ramp them up this curve.
Yes, absolutely. The mental health of our employees and leaders going through this is so crucial. The valley of despair, absolutely. It's like, how do you even think about changing your way of doing business, or what the new vision is going to be when there's just such a worry that all of our economy is going to get shut down, and there's no real answer or solution. So I totally agree with you, Robert, having that one-on-one discussion. And it's so much different now that we have to do these virtual discussions right now, right? And it's not just a Zoom call. It's not just sitting on a Zoom call. Hi, you know, it's literally picking up the phone. How you doing? How's your family? You know, you know, how are you doing during this critical period? And not to get into everyone's personal information, but really caring about how they're doing, because when you move to the acceptance level, all those are going to be at different phases and different for each individual, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I see you're opening up a whole other can of worms.
Oh, sorry. I'm living this, right? So I totally understand.
We recently incorporated transformational leadership as a metric for driving highly engaged change commitment. And one of the dimensions of transformational leadership is that you have to demonstrate care and empathy for the team members that you're leading. So you're kind of hitting all the right notes there, Shar.
Yeah, well, it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think, you know, that self-actualization is at the very top. All of us that remember that in school.
Exactly.
But you got to address the bottom of that foundation with the essentials of you know, of human caring.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
takes a different kind of leader today than it may have before.
I'm going to rush through these like fairly quickly,
Sure.
But just a couple of, and by all means, you know, these will be made available. And so happy to share these out with anyone who's interested in them. But just a couple of examples that we're seeing with some of our clients. So that shift to digital, and where really this is the COVID-19 situation has almost put digital transformation on steroids, right? Because it's like, it might have been a nice to have before for some organizations, but it's like now we actually have to do it to conduct our business. And so what does that look like? So providing those, you know, there's an example of a life insurance company that's providing virtual medical screens. So that's one of the ways, and obviously that means they have to sort of, it's a very involved process. So how do we do that, sort of training and coaching people through that process, and sort of managing that virtually. The next thing is really boosting the social footprint. So it's a couple of, and this has been mentioned a couple of times today. So there's really an opportunity to kind of come out on the other side of this and manage during the crisis by saying, we're going to be a company that stands behind our values, or this is an example for us to display and show the values that we talk about by really helping out during this time. So there's clients that we're working with that are saying, there's teams that want to form internally their employee resource groups to really talk about what does it mean for us to be a more equitable company, a more inclusive company. So, and that's kind of bottoms up change management. So we're like really fun when that happens. And then there's examples of tech companies that are saying, okay, let's offer some of our solutions to be able to do that contact tracing obviously on an opt-in basis, but, we'll make this data public and available so that, hey, the scientists that are researchers that are on the front lines of this and trying to come up with a vaccine and sort of who are the types of people who are likely to become infected and show it versus those who are not. Kind of those opportunities. These are the types of opportunities that a situation like ours and really presents. We have a manufacturing client who said we're going to repurpose a portion of our manufacturing capabilities to produce face masks for people who in need. So again, these are the examples of innovation. We talked, I won't drain this one because we talked about the video conferencing piece, but really how do you engage with your employee base and with customers? So there's one interesting example of a car dealership that's taken to doing sort of virtual test drives. So they've got, you can imagine a guy with the camera and he's going out and they're virtually walking some customers through that car riding experience who don't feel comfortable going out. So again, that's that innovation piece. And then finally, using technology to increase intimacy. So what are some of the tools, so like with work from home, those kind of over the phone discussions, how often do those occur? Do we need to ramp those up compared to what we're doing now? Those are things that conversations, especially on the HR front, that we can be having with our team members. And then real quick, kind of just a few tips to reduce resistance. So that based on the 2IC model, we really focused on impact, influence, and consistency. So here's a set of questions for each of those factors that as a leader, if you're managing and leading an organizational change, and this is a big initiative, what are those questions that you have to have ready-made answers for to really be able to say, to do each of these things effectively, right? And so when we talk about impact, what's possible? Where are we trying to go? Why are we, what's the big deal about this, right? From an influence perspective, why are we doing this? Who's going to benefit from this and why? And how can you actually be a part of this? What do I need from you to make this successful? And then from a consistency perspective, how are we going to support you? So those are a couple of questions. And again, these are available, but these are the types of questions from, reducing that stress, reducing that resistance to change. Have the answers to these questions so that you can sort of, as these conversations start to happen and you're leading these conversations with your teams, answer these, in one way or another. And then you can start to say, then people say, oh, okay, they'll start to make those connections naturally. You don't need a fancy change model, but you answer these questions and it's going to get you to where you need to go. It's going to get you that 80% of the way.
Well, I'll definitely go back and re-listen to this presentation and write down these questions because this will be very helpful. I think your employees hearing these things. Oh, Robert, you're going to love what's going on in the chat. Carol talked about, that our organization can go through change whiplash. And that was one word I love, change whiplash. So I'm kind of curious what exactly that means. And then Jason talks about change being like a boomerang. So, you throw the boomerang and it's going to come back at you, or hit you, as Sam says. But yeah, that is absolutely true. If you're not being very cognizant of these change processes and having these crucial conversations with these types of questions and talking about the change, it's gonna come around and potentially come back. It's never going to go away. It's going to be an ongoing thing, right?
That's exactly right, Shar. And the other thing is a lot of people, a lot of people that have been with organizations for some time are going to experience one of two things: either change fatigue, especially if it's an organization that's like, sort of change du jour, like, every 3 months we're doing something different. I've worked for organizations like that. Or they're going to experience a situation where a change didn't go well before, and no one, like, then leadership kind of wants to sweep it under the rug and not talk about it, which really goes against that consistency factor of saying, let's be honest, let's be transparent. This is what we were thinking. This is what we were trying to do. This is why it didn't work the last time. Here's what we're trying to do differently and why we think it's going to work this time. So it's a lot of it's just candor and having those conversations and kind of that openness and transparency to say, we're not going to get it right every time. That goes back to the fail fast principle. We're not going to get it right every time, but what did we learn from that? Or this is what we did learn from that, and here's how we're going to make it better going forward. Can we get your help to do that? Right.
Right.
So just being open and honest goes a really long way.
Well, you have to set the culture at the very beginning. So every time when we hire our employees, we talk about change is constant. Every day we have a change, every day. And that's just our culture.
Right.
So, and not set up the scenario that our culture is anything that doesn't involve change. So it's really important at the beginning. Otherwise, you'll have employees disgruntled, frustrated, angry. What's going on? Why is everything changing? I like Diane mentioned the book, the book Who Moved My Cheese? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's a oldie and a goodie.
Exactly.
But, right. And I'm glad I wore yellow today, like you, Robert, and that goes well with your presentation.
There you go, right? So very cool. So that's all I had, but I'm open to any questions or discussion.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, but I noticed you had a slide. So if anybody wanted to talk with you or perhaps have a consultation, this is how they reach you.
That's exactly it. So that's my direct and my email, robert@thechangeshop.com, or come on over to our site, thechangeshop.com.
Well, I love it. We're gonna take a look at that, and so I don't know if I have a lot more as far as questions go. Another good one is our iceberg is melting. Diane mentioned that one too. And I have to say, our iceberg is kind of it's melting a lot because it's pretty hot around here. But so anyway, as we wrap up, just want to mention here, and thank you, Robert, and thank you for partnering with us. But here we have a free gift as well, which is called the Tma Assessment, and this is absolutely fantastic. It's a free gift. Sam, did you want to maybe describe a few things about the TMA? Nope, you're on mute.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I mentioned this ahead of time and early in the presentation. If you'd like to sign up for a free assessment, you'll get access to the TMA tool. And just to give you a few, a couple glimpses of some of the feedback this gives you a little bit about your direction of personality and your preferences and so forth. So there's a lot of interesting information out of this that will help you grow as a professional, and can help with your team and doing teaming or onboarding and sourcing and so forth. It really covers this full spectrum of the talent management suite. So very powerful stuff here. But feel free to sign up and we'll share that with you.
Yeah, it's very insightful. And if you want to talk to either one of us, we'll explain how this could be when we talked about what Robert said about having those deep conversations and building the trust, and really talking about that consistent change, like what Lisa and Sumit were talking about. This TMA is really relevant to doing that. And your traditional performance management processes and the traditional ways of coaching employees, I think employees are looking now to leaders to do something very different, very unique, and very progressive today to really build those crucial conversations about job preferences, talents, and really leading organizations through these challenging times. So this is a great resource. So we only have about a minute here. So I just want to say Thank you all for joining here with us at the People Strategy Forum. We have been having a fantastic time trucking along since March and doing these forums. Please watch our forums. We have amazing guest speakers like Robert every week and some amazing talent. And again, I highly encourage you, just go back and listen to some of our great presentations. Listen to Robert's presentation. You're going to learn a lot. And also, each of those presentations have gifts. So imagine the value of these forums. And also, we would love your feedback. If you have some future topics that you are interested in hearing, please let us know. If you'd like to, email us, email Sam here. And also, if you think that you have a great expertise in a particular topic, we are looking for future speakers as well, because this is going to be ongoing.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to show your expertise, and we'd love to share that with the community so that we can all grow and be more well-rounded professionals. And so next month, or next week,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, next week, we have Jorge Martinez, which is a TMA practitioner out of South America, who is going to discuss about how to build a robust recruiting process to ensure that you can get the right people and so forth. A lot of companies right now are going out there and are wanting to retain and attract the right people for their future workforce. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that. And I think you're going to also be joining us on that as well, Charlotte.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the talent acquisition process is so crucial right now. A lot of us employers are having a challenge recruiting. Yeah, I'll be talking about that as well. So looking forward to it. So thank you all. We appreciate your time. And till next week.
Yes, everyone take care. Stay healthy.
All right. Take care. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye.